Warning, this video contains team selection and captain choices which some viewers may find offensive.
Hey guys, and welcome back to FPL TV. Before looking to double game week 27, let's first look back to 26 and see how my team performed. After much deliberation last week, I chose to stick with the Haaland captaincy in the early kickoff, in a game week where there was a big captaincy split between him and Arsenal's Bukayo Saka. Once the Norwegian delivered just 4 points, I was obviously fearing the worst, with Arsenal then set to face Bournemouth at home. However, incredibly, Haaland still came out on top anyway, as Saka blanked despite the Gunners scoring 3 in that incredible comeback. No points for Odegaard or Gabriel in that game either, so disappointing given the fixture, but the overall feeling for me personally was relief that 4 points from Captain Haaland wasn't too bad at all in the end. Elsewhere in my team, with Kieran Trippier away to Man City last week, I chose to call upon once again my budget enabler Tyrone Mings, one of my biggest differentials. And just like he did in the blank game week last week, when called upon he duly delivered. A clean sheet, 2 bonus points, an absolute hero. His clean sheet, as well as Kepa's in goal against Leeds, was a great start to the game week for me, especially considering there were many wildcards in play last week and I needed all the points I could get. Speaking of the wildcard, I entitled my video last week as At War with the Wildcarders, and that was due to last week being a very popular one to utilise the wildcard, mostly in anticipation of Brighton and Brentford's upcoming double game weeks as well as blank game week 28. This was no doubt the key story of the game week, because whilst many managers wildcarded with those double and blank game weeks in mind, this was importantly at the expense of Liverpool assets, and what an unbelievable turn of events that ended up being, with Liverpool putting 7 goals past United and both Mo Salah and Darwin Núñez posting double-digit hauls. The Egyptian King's 21-pointer all the more significant considering he was wildcarded out by so many, and thus becoming a differential for me last week. Last week, I was considering a -4 hit to remove Darwin Núñez too for this fixture for Ivan Toney, and thankfully I did hold on to him in what would have cost me 8 points there. In that 7-0 drubbing, I did transfer out Cody Gakpo last week, who sadly scored 14 points, a haul that I certainly wasn't expecting, 2 excellently taken goals. However, that free transfer was used to bring in Brighton's Matoma anyway, who basically matched him with a goal and assist of his own. What a player. So for game week 26, thanks to of course the Egyptian King and Darwin Núñez, my team scored a very pleasing 74 points, in what I would say is one of the only genuinely great game weeks of my FPL season. It was the kind of game week where almost everything went my way really. A very fortunate week for me and a very unfortunate week for those that wildcarded. In a week where I really thought I was going to be up against it and likely looking at damage control, ended up being a game week in which I more than halved my rank, rising from 319k up to 144k. Absolutely delighted. Are things going to continue being this fruitful? Well, I still think those that wildcarded are still much better set up for the next few game weeks than I am. So although I expect to likely drop in rank for the upcoming double game week in 27, this huge rise in ranking in 26 was a big bonus, and a good head start for me now considering I don't have many doublers next week. Perhaps it's more a case of winning the battle with the wildcarders here, but the war is certainly not over. So let's move on to double game week 27 now, check out my current team lineup and discuss some potential transfer plans. Also, if you do enjoy the content here at FPL TV, then as always be sure to leave a like and most importantly get subscribed. You can also hit the notification bell so you always know when a new FPL TV video goes live. Now, game week 27 was always going to be a very difficult one for my side. Having wildcarded early back in game week 22, I'm now not well set up with a wide range of doublers when compared to those that wildcarded last week. That's the reason why, as said earlier, that I was so happy to have made lots of good ground in 26, that I can probably take a red arrow on the chin this game week, in what is a very likely outcome I'd say. With that said, if it weren't for the double game week this week, my team on paper actually would look very solid. Liverpool against Bournemouth, Arsenal against Fulham, assets which most wildcard teams from last week either don't own or are set to bench this game week. So although I am certainly very much up against it this game week and very likely to drop in ranking, who knows? For me, it'll simply be a case of relying on very good single game week players to match or outdo the doublers. In fairness, having to rely on the likes of Liverpool and Arsenal, both very good teams, is certainly not a bad horse to be backing, so fingers crossed. In terms of my transfer activity this week, well, without a wildcard, I've got to continue thinking about the long term. And my moves now are going to be more dictated by when I choose to use the free hit chip, and that's not been easy to settle on. There's going to be a blank game week next week in 28, and then one in game week 32. And considering as things stand, I've only got 6 guaranteed starters for 28 next week, Well, it's looking very likely I am going to free hit in 28. Is Game Week 28 going to be a fruitful week for the free hit? Well, let's say it doesn't exactly excite me. I'd like to use it for a double game week, but not sure my team is in a position to do so. As for blank Game Week 32, well, I feel, at least with that one, it's still 5 game weeks away, and we still don't know for certain who will progress in the cup and therefore blank. So although the free hit would be very handy there too, I'm at least going to have up to 5 free transfers to use in preparation for that one, whereas for Game Week 28 I've only got 2. Utilising my free hit in 28 will also allow me to target some Brighton players this game week who I'll want for their double in 27 and beyond. Another reason for using the free hit in 28 as opposed to 32 is that in Game Week 32, Liverpool are confirmed to face Nottingham Forest at home, and seeing as though in my team I've still got the Salah and Darwin double up, perhaps that's reason to free hit in 28 whilst Liverpool blank, and I'll then be well covered when 32 comes along. Of course, it's very much team dependent, and no one knows until it happens what strategy will turn out to be the correct one. But for me, I'm not sure I can see a cleaner route for my team for the coming weeks, so free hit 28 is looking extremely likely. It's not guaranteed, but I'm certainly leaning that way. With that in mind, my transfer targets this game week are therefore, as mentioned, Brighton players. Options for the long term with plenty of double game weeks on the horizon, with my most likely move this game week being Rico Lewis to Estupiñán for 1 free transfer. Of course, I would prefer to target their attack for the upcoming fixtures, but my midfield is already very solid, so it's hard to fit in the likes of McAllister, who I do really like as an option. It's unlikely McAllister will come in for me this week, but if he were to do so, that will depend on the fitness of Odegaard, who was notably unwell for the midweek Europa League game. Longer term, I'm going to want to keep Odegaard, I think, especially given he does have a nice fixture in Game Week 32, so sadly McAllister does look a no-go for me. Considering my midfield is already jam-packed, there is one budget route into Brighton's attack this week in the shape of a forward, and that's differential Evan Ferguson. If Odegaard was set to miss 1 game, then moving Gnonto to Ferguson could be my move. I can then bench Odegaard for a week, keep him for the longer term, and then have Ferguson available for the rest of the season to target Brighton's double game weeks when needed. Perhaps not as exciting or reliable as the midfield Brighton options, but for my team structure a very handy enabler I think. Gnonto has yet to cement his place in Gracia's Leeds team so far too, so longer term I'll need to be rid of him I think. Now, one of my main targets for this game week, as mentioned in my last video, was of course Ivan Toney, talisman for Brentford with a very appealing double against Everton and Southampton, and due to his ownership set to be sky high this week, he's certainly my biggest fear. My game week being good or bad will certainly be in the hands of this man no doubt, who will also be heavily captained. Now, if I had enough money in the bank to upgrade Gnonto to Toney in 1 free transfer, that would be the absolute no-brainer for me, but sadly I can't quite afford it. There are other routes to getting him this week, such as downgrading Gabriel to Estupiñán to free up funds, or simply downgrading Darwin to Ivan Toney, all considerations. But considering that both Gabriel and Darwin are both confirmed to play in blank game week 32, I don't want to start creating further problems for me in that game week, especially if I'm not to have the free hit handy. For that reason, sadly it's looking very likely that I'll be going without Toney for game week 27, and that's my one big concern for this game week. Looking further forward, well, I can free hit him in now for game week 28 anyway, and then longer term I'm not particularly convinced by Brentford's fixtures. He also does remain 2 yellow cards away from a 2-match ban up until game week 32, so apart from this game week, longer term I don't mind going without him I think. Will that change before the deadline hits? Well, it always could. I'd love to own him for this one, but I'm trying to look beyond this game week. So, as things stand, Rico Lewis to Estupiñán with 1 free transfer my most likely move this game week, which would then allow me to bench Gabriel away to Fulham. I expect Fulham to likely score there, so I don't mind benching Gabriel. However, if Odegaard does then completely miss out, then Gabriel becomes a very solid backup, so I quite like this setup. This transfer is by no means confirmed, but the one I'm most likely to make. For the captaincy in game week 27, considering I'm seriously lacking in double game week players, well, this could end up making my decision a bit easier when compared to other teams. Single game week players like Rashford, Haaland and Salah all certainly considerations for me, but for now it does sit with Matoma and that's likely where it's going to stay. To be honest, this captaincy choice isn't based much on underlying data. It's simply just a case of rating Matoma very, very highly, him having a double game week and liking both of his fixtures, against Leeds and Palace, neither of which are in great form. Now of course, if I were to own Ivan Toney this week, he'd obviously be a strong contender for the armband and I probably would captain him if I owned him. Also as a bit of rank protection to be honest, considering just how good the last few game weeks have been for me. Simply transferring Darwin to Ivan Toney here in one free transfer and captaining him still a possibility for me this week, but for reasons explained earlier, I'm trying to hold off on that move. As for Matoma, I think even if he does blank in this double game week, I don't think I'd have regrets in captaining him here. I've been a huge fan of his this season, and to be honest, I'd be quite excited giving this ball at the armband whatever the outcome. Whatever I decide, what a season-defining game week this could turn out to be. So that's everything regarding my team discussed for Game Week 27. A difficult week to talk about really, with the upcoming schedule being quite complicated to manoeuvre, but hopefully it gives you an idea of my plans. Rico Lewis to Estupiñán or non-Tota Ferguson, the transfers I'm most likely to make, but anything could happen from now until the game week deadline. I now want to wait as long as possible for an update regarding Odegaard's fitness first, as well as keeping one eye on any weather updates which could pose a threat to fixtures. My resolve will also certainly be tested this week to not bring in Ivan Toney before the deadline. Good luck to all of you watching for the upcoming game week, FPL responsibly, and I'll catch you all in the next video.